Balram accidentally saw something he was not supposed to see. Afraid of being scolded by his master, he quickly turned his head away, but when he saw that no one was paying attention, he couldn't help but sneak another glance. To hide his nervousness, he rubbed his eyes and scratched his neck. His master immediately noticed this strange behavior. "Balram, what did you just do? Did you rub your eyes?" Balram quickly thought and then pointed to a large tree by the roadside, hastily saying, "Sir, that small path over there, people say that before he found the Bodhi tree and attained enlightenment, the Buddha once walked on that road." "Really?" Ashok and Pinky, the couple who had just returned from America, immediately believed his fabricated story. They even imitated his gesture, clasping their hands together and bowing to the tree by the road. Watching these upper-class people being so easily deceived, Balram suddenly realized the rich were not as formidable as he had thought. After dropping the couple off, since his village was not far from where Pinky grew up, his master allowed him to drive back to visit his relatives. On the way into the village, Balram continuously honked the horn to attract attention. He even deliberately stopped the car at the village gate, where the crowd was the largest. Under the admiring gazes of the villagers, Balram, with his polished appearance, immediately became the center of attention. His vanity was deeply satisfied. But when he arrived home, he realized his grandmother did not seem pleased. It turned out that since he started working as a driver for the landlord's family, he had never sent money back. She didn't care whether he was living well or not, she only cared about her grandson. In India's rigid caste system, Balram's family belonged to the lowest class. More than 10 family members were crammed into a dilapidated house led by his cunning grandmother. Regardless of age, everyone had to go out to work, and all their earnings had to be handed over to her. His father, after years of overwork, had contracted tuberculosis. His ruthless grandmother refused to pay for medical expenses and even cremated him before he could take his last breath. When Balram obediently handed over all the money he had earned, his grandmother was delighted and even personally cooked him a chicken meal. But since he had lost contact for a while, she felt he was slipping out of her control. To secure her money tree, she announced that she had found him a wife. But Balram, who had just seen the world outside, how could he willingly bind his life here? He knew that once he got married, he would follow in his father's footsteps and completely lose the chance to escape the chicken coop. "I need more time, I'm not ready for marriage." His grandmother ignored his feelings and forced him to get married before the end of the year. Outraged, Balram declared that not only would he refuse to get married, but he would also stop sending money home. When his older brother chased after him, Balram advised, "Trust me, she will drain you to your last drop of blood and then you will die just like our father." But the cruelty of the caste system continued to haunt him every second. One day, while serving tea to guests, Pinky Madam, who had always treated him well, suddenly lost her temper in front of everyone. "Balram, what are you doing? What is he doing? Look at him, he's disgusting. His uniform is filthy and his mouth always reeks of betel nut, take him away." After the guests left, Pinky Madam called Balram over. She had no intention of scolding him because in her eyes, the caste system was just an outdated societal constraint. Moreover, she herself had once belonged to a lower caste, worked hard to study abroad in America, and finally achieved the life she desired. Forget it, forget that caste system. Looking at his yellowed teeth in the mirror, Balram, for the first time, realized that teeth would turn yellow if not brushed, and clothes would get dirty if not washed. That night, he went out to buy a tube of toothpaste and a new set of clothes. He tried to change his bad habits from childhood. Returning home, he began brushing his teeth continuously in front of the mirror. But no matter how hard he tried, the stains on his teeth remained. It turned out that some things could never be changed, no matter how much effort was put in. No one had ever taught Balram that he needed to brush his teeth twice a day. He started to resent his late father, the man who had brought him into the world but never taught him how to live like a real human being. Only when his gums began to bleed did Balram stop. The stains on his teeth could not be removed, just like his origins, which could never be washed away. But Balram refused to accept fate like most people. The desire to escape the chicken coop grew stronger inside him. However, such humiliation was still not enough to break the cage because a chicken only truly wakes up when its throat is slit, and what happened next would completely change his fate. One day, Balram accompanied his master Ashok and Pinky Madam to a bar, where they drank until late at night. The two staggered out, and Pinky Madam, in a sudden whim, wanted to drive. As a servant, Balram didn't dare refuse. But Pinky Madam, who had never driven before, kept speeding up. Suddenly, a little girl ran into the street. The car stopped. Balram immediately got out to check and found that the girl was lifeless. The victim was a child from the lower class. When Ashok wanted to take her to the hospital, Balram quickly stopped him. In India, it was common for poor families to have 10 or more children. Many parents couldn't even remember their children's names. This would not warrant a police investigation, but if they called an ambulance, they would all end up in jail. Balram quickly drove Ashok and Pinky Madam away from the scene. Back home, He carefully wiped the blood off the car, but strangely, he did not feel a single ounce of guilt. Such incidents happened too often in the slums. Just like the chickens in the coop, they never mourned for their fellow chickens. Instead, Balram felt a slight sense of satisfaction. When his master faced trouble, he was the one who took care of everything. Who knows, maybe the landlord would even praise him for this. Sure enough, the next morning, the landlord called Balram into the house and for once, allowed him to sit on the sofa. For the first time, he felt the treatment of someone who had done something significant. Even Mongoose, who had always made things difficult for him, handed him a betel nut, something Balram enjoyed. Without hesitation, Balram took it and chewed, but then, Mongoose handed him a document. When Balram looked at it, he realized something was wrong. It was a confession letter that would put all the blame on him. The flame of satisfaction inside Balram instantly turned cold. He never imagined that after all his loyalty, he would end up being sacrificed and discarded so easily. Ashok spoke up to defend Balram. "We shouldn't do this, it's wrong." But Mongoose, his older brother, immediately interrupted. "Then you and Pinky should go to the police station and confess. If you really understand the law, handle it yourself. If not, shut up." Ashok, unable to say anything, remained silent. Balram looked at the section for family members on the document and saw that his grandmother had already signed it. It seemed his family had been bought off. He had no choice but to accept his fate. At that moment, a seed of hatred took root deep inside Balram. Why did he have to bear the consequences of their mistakes while they continued to live lavishly? Although the confession letter was merely a safeguard for the landlord's family, it felt like a sword hanging over Balram's head, slowly wearing him down. In the following days, he awaited his trial in a dark basement. But one day, the landlord sent someone to call him upstairs. Balram's heart pounded. The inevitable had come. He had no courage to run away, so he walked upstairs with a heavy heart. But when he entered the room, he realized there were no police officers there. It seemed his prediction was right, no one cared about the life or death of a little girl from the slums. Yet, he was still just a lowly servant. He knelt down and massaged the landlord's feet. Though his heart was filled with rage, Balram dared not let it show on his face. At that moment, Pinky Madam approached and told Balram that since there were no witnesses that night and no one had reported it, he no longer had to take the blame. Hearing this, Balram felt as if a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He bowed his head onto the landlord's knee, but the landlord immediately kicked him away in disdain. "Enough with the acting. Get back to massaging my feet." Pinky Madam, an educated woman, found the landlord's family too cruel and heartless. She argued fiercely with Ashok, but she could not change the deeply ingrained corruption of this country. She no longer wanted to stay here for even a second. That night, she sought out Balram and asked him to take her to the airport. Because Pinky Madam had once helped him, Balram took the risk and secretly drove her there. Perhaps out of guilt, Pinky Madam gave Balram some money, hoping he would soon escape the chicken coop. The next day, Balram told Ashok that Pinky Madam had left. But instead of reflecting on himself, Ashok blamed Balram. The true face of his master was now fully revealed. Ashok beat Balram repeatedly. Unable to endure any longer, Balram pushed Ashok back forcefully. "Master, don't grab my collar." Ashok was shocked. He never expected that the once subservient servant would dare to fight back. "I wish they had thrown you in jail that night." At that moment, Balram finally saw things clearly. Even though Ashok had been educated in a university for years, caste discrimination had been ingrained in his bones. Balram's faith in him completely shattered. No matter how loyal he was, in the eyes of his master, he was nothing more than a well-trained dog. For the next 2 days, Balram remained in the garage, waiting to be fired. But when he nervously approached his master, he found Ashok completely drunk. To keep his job, Balram cleaned the room and even prepared a glass of lemon water for Ashok. But when he returned, he saw that Ashok had already passed out on the sofa. Seeing that his master was unresponsive, Balram sat down on the couch, picked up the lemon water, and took a long sip. Then he sneaked into Ashok's dressing room, put on his master's expensive suit, and carefully styled his hair. He took out a bottle of fine liquor that Ashok had stored, poured himself a full glass, and began to savor the fleeting luxury of a wealthy life. From that moment, his desire for freedom grew even stronger. In the following days, the relationship between Balram and Ashok seemed to ease. But then, a divorce letter arrived from abroad, completely tearing apart the fragile facade between them. Ashok once again took out his anger on Balram. Feeling utterly hopeless, Balram began to learn the ways of deception and theft. In front of his master, he was still the loyal servant, but behind his back he was scheming for his own gain. Overcharging for car repairs and issuing inflated invoices became routine. Occasionally, he sold cheap fuel and used his knowledge of the landlord's schedule to take passengers when the car was not in use. In less than half a month, Balram earned what he would have made in 2.5 years. But he was not satisfied with small gains, he wanted more. One day, Balram overheard a conversation between Mongoose and Mukesh about replacing the driver. They had already started looking for someone new. Balram immediately felt an immense sense of danger. But luckily for him, the politician that the landlord's family had backed lost in the elections. To secure more privileges, they had to bribe the new minister. However, the demanded amount was an astronomical 4 million rupees. Balram listened to everything. When he heard about this vast sum of money, greed surged inside him. The next day, his nephew brought him a letter from his grandmother. "My dear grandson, it has been 7 months and 2 days since you last sent money home. The city has corrupted your soul. Life here is very difficult. Lord Indra is displeased and often causes floods. You must send money home. Moreover, I have arranged a marriage for you. If you do not return, we will send the girl to find you. If you refuse, we will write to your master and explain everything." After reading it, Balram angrily slapped his nephew. This cold letter left him completely disillusioned with his family. At that moment, he had nothing left to fear. He decided to take a gamble. Later, Balram told Ashok about the letter. Unexpectedly, Ashok easily granted him a day off. But the rich never give anything away for free. They wanted to take advantage of Balram's absence to interview new drivers. That day, Balram took his nephew to visit the zoo. By chance, he saw a white tiger, an incredibly rare animal. Seeing it up close, Balram realized that the white tiger exuded a noble aura, one that he longed to possess. It symbolized defiance and the refusal to be oppressed. Thinking about his past, being controlled by his grandmother at home and treated worse than cattle outside, Balram had had enough of this life with no way out. Now he only wanted to take control of his own destiny and never be ruled by anyone again. While looking at the white tiger, Balram suddenly fainted, not from fear, but from excitement. He resolved to fight against this unfair fate. He would become that rare white tiger. Back home, Balram smashed a beer bottle and hid it under the car seat. On the day of the transaction, Balram drove Ashok to the meeting point. When they stopped on a deserted road, he pretended to check the car. "What's wrong?" "The tire is flat." "Call someone to fix it. It's raining heavily. If we don't fix it quickly, you'll be late. If you help me, it won't take long." In a rush, Ashok didn't think much and got out of the car to check. As he bent down to inspect the tire, Balram suddenly spoke. "It looks fine, sir. Honestly, you should have replaced me a long time ago." Ashok could hardly believe it. A chicken that was about to be slaughtered had suddenly turned into a fierce white tiger. Balram flipped Ashok over, raised the broken beer bottle to his throat, and without hesitation struck. The bottle shattered. Balram let out a wild scream. At that moment, he was finally free. That very night, he took his nephew and fled to Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India. To honor the master who had influenced him the most, Balram changed his name to Ashok Sharma. Using the bribery skills he had learned from the landlord, he successfully bought off the local police chief. The arrest warrant for Balram was revoked, and all taxi drivers in the city were arrested for various reasons. With the market left empty, Balram quickly established White Tiger Taxi, monopolizing the industry. Coming from the lower class, he understood injustice and refused to repeat the corrupt ways of the upper class. He always paid his drivers on time, making them more loyal and hardworking. From there, his business thrived. From an ordinary man, Balram became a successful entrepreneur. One day, he watched the news and learned that his entire family, 17 people, had been murdered. He immediately knew that this was the landlord's revenge, but he never regretted his choice. Balram had escaped the chicken coop and transformed into a rare white tiger, a mythical creature that appears once in thousands. He now attended prestigious events and stood on equal footing with politicians. Who would have thought that once, he had to bow and scrape before the wealthy just to survive? I have turned the tables. I have succeeded. I have escaped the chicken coop. The white tiger exposes the brutal truth of Indian society. For those from the lower class, there seem to be only two ways to break free: politics or crime. What do you think of this film? Leave a comment below.